Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to this policy dialogue organized by the European Policy Center in cooperation with COPLAN, the Institute for Habitat Development in Albania. This event, which aims to shine a bright spotlight on Albania's EU integration path, is held in the context of a project coordinated by COPLAN with EPC as partner, a project funded by the European Union and which promotes dialogue for inclusive and evidence-based policy development in Albania. Very conveniently, this meeting we're having is taking place after yesterday's General Affairs Council failed again to agree on the negotiating framework for Albania and North Macedonia, resulting in a new postponement of the Intergovernmental Conference with these two countries. Another delay, another instance of the member states interfering with the accession process for reasons other than actual progress in Albania and North Macedonia, and a decision which goes against the European Commission's positive avis on both these candidate states. The message was delivered in yesterday's press conference, all wrapped up in a discourse that boasted about the strategic importance of enlargement for the Union and the region. But do such grand political statements still resonate? How did Albania receive yesterday's news? And where do we go from here? What is in store next for Albania, for the Balkan region, and for enlargement policy? Well, a highly competent panel of speakers will help us make sense of this recent development and also help us figure out the way forward. So I'm honored to introduce to you today Mazi, Chief Negotiator for Albania's EU Accession, Tanja Miščević, Deputy Secretary General at the Regional Cooperation Council, Alberto Cammarata, Deputy Head of Unit for Albania and Bosnia-Herzegovina at the European Commission, and Ardian Hackaj, Research Director and Coordinator of Tirana Connectivity Forum at the Cooperation and Development Institute. Many thanks to all our distinguished speakers for making time in their busy agendas to be with us here today. As always, I will first have an exchange with our panelists, and then we'll open the floor for questions and comments, live or in written, from all of you in the audience. But before I turn to the panel, I would like to invite Aida Ciro, Head of Acquisition and Strategic Communication and Project Manager at COPLAN, to make a few opening remarks. Aida, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Corina. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us in this online policy dialogue on Albania's EU integration process. We believe that civil society is not a separate agenda, so rather we believe it's a prerequisite to ensuring sufficient influence on and ownership of the reforms leading to Albania's integration to the European Union. Now, reflecting on yesterday's dynamics from the General Affairs Council meeting, let us use this opportunity to discuss and ask questions to our panel of distinguished guests and partner organizations on key aspects affecting the integration process. This is the first of a series of events that COPLAN Institute for Habitat Development and the European Policy Center plan to hold as part of this European Union supported initiative. So I kindly invite you to participate and follow us in all our future events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aida. Let's now turn our attention to the topic at hand and delve straight in with the first question for the chief negotiator. Ambassador Matia, were you surprised with yesterday's council decision? Do you feel that Albania was penalized for Bulgaria's veto on North Macedonia? And what are now the next steps and priorities for your country?
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting, as we call it, online policy dialogue. And the title is a bit strange to me. Albania's race to the EU, race with whom? View from pit stop, and pit stop has also casualties, usually in the car racing history. And I hope my country and of course other candidates have had some casualties actually in the last 4 years, as you would have noted during this process that started actually with our signature of the MSA in 2009 up till today. It's 12 years. And from 2018 or 19, when the Commission proposed that the first intergovernmental conference takes place for Albania, we've seen a procrastination on the part of the Council. We've seen a delaying of the process from 2018 to 2019. 2019 was not possible. And the then former Italian Prime Minister Conte said, this is a historic mistake of the EU, end quote. And then we have 2020, no agreement. And then 2021, it seems that there is no agreement, but we still have 6 months to go. And I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be some compromise, there will be some agreement, and that the EU will find the strength in the end, if there is no agreement, to keep the process going. The enlargement process should continue. And I'm sure that we will hear some good news in the next month or so, so that we would have the first intergovernmental conference taking place this year within the possibly Slovenian presidency. So let's fingers crossed.
All right, so cautiously optimistic, but what will you be doing now? What are your plans and priorities for this period while you're waiting, in a sense, for a positive opinion? What are some issues that are still pending, for instance, that you will be addressing?
Well, I've come to this position after a very long time of service abroad, about 3 decades, including 12 years in very high positions in international bodies of the United Nations system. And I'm used to be not surprised. I'm used with the justifications, with the reasoning, with the sometimes the tabling of various commons. And I'm used also to seeing countries looking at strategic issues from their own vantage point. So the architecture, the orchestra of the EU itself, sometimes plays with a good conductor, sometimes doesn't seem to play with a conductor. I do have a lot of respect for the presidencies. They are doing an excellent job, but still member states are member states. And so they look at issues from their own vantage point. And in this respect, I'm not surprised. Actually, it was expected on my side to continue to have something like a debate on issues that are bilateral, for which we are suffering practically the consequences of a marginal approach. Normally, your question would encourage me to give you a direct answer. Normally in diplomacy, you don't speak your mind. You say the opposite of what you utter. But still, I hope you get my message. The mantra of the EU, since I think Salonika, when the large process started with a big bang in 2004, plus, has seen in the last 35, 40 years, only 2 individual countries joining the EU on their merit, individual countries, Greece and Croatia. The rest have joined the EU mostly in 2s or in 3s, sometimes in 4s, whatever. But the mantra has always been individual merit. The mantra has always been the performance of the countries, the meeting of criteria, and so forth. Is this decision based on merit, individual criteria, or has it changed? This would be my question. I have the answer. I know the answer. It has not changed. No, it has not changed. We are for enlargement. The place of the Western Balkans is in the EU, but this is a rhetoric which we have heard for 4 or 14 years. Fine, now it's time. Our countries have delivered. Albania has delivered, right? So the moment is for EU to find the strength and deliver and give our people the right message. Of course, I do understand sometimes in the EU context, there is a need for a more regional approach. But the Western Balkan region has not 2 countries, it has 6 countries. So what is the meaning of a regional approach is more important? Why is Bosnia and Kosovo is left out then? So a regional approach either makes real sense or it's better not to use it. So I'm not teaching, I'm not giving lectures on this issue, but as you asked me, this is my feeling. Of course, the credibility is at stake. I'm sure the credibility is at stake. For the time being, the support of the population, the broadest circle of the population in my country, has been up till today something around 90%, 92% for EU enlargement, for integration. I'm not sure we're going to have the same support. It will go down. The fault is not of Albania. That's the point. And if there is a problem, the EU should find the strength actually to give these countries, to give the next generation. It's not about my generation. I'm past 65 years of age. It's not about, it's about the future of those who are in their teens, in the early 20s. It's for them. It's for the age of the generation that is, I'm certain, those who are 20 years now will be 30 years when Albania joins, or when Western Balkan countries join. So this is a critical strategic problem, and this is how it should be seen. And problems of bilateral character. In every country, in every area of Europe, you can find bilateral issues. They should not be an impediment, nor should they slow down the process. And I'm sure at some point, very soon, hopefully, there will be a compromise between a member state and a candidate country. Both are dear friends, neighbors. We want to see the problems, their disputes resolved as soon as possible. I know that some certain bilateral issues might be linked also with a broader circle of 27 or 26, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the MSA obligations, legal obligations. Still, if there is no agreement, please talk. That will be our message. Mm-hmm. And if there is no agreement, again, please talk and talk and talk until the compromise is found. Mm-hmm. This process must continue. And I'm cautiously optimistic it will continue, and we'll hear good news very soon.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But since you mentioned the perils of a regional approach or of clustering countries together, if this agreement is not reached in the near future, would you envision, or how would you feel about the decoupling of Albania and North Macedonia?
Well, this is a word that I've been hearing since the early 20s, when Bulgaria was negotiating with Romania for entry into the EU. And there was an EU member state that blocked Bulgaria, which was a little bit more advanced than Romania, and then let's wait for them. And that's where the story of decoupling and coupling starts on. I don't want to use this word because sometimes it's irritating for the listeners. For me, it is not very important whether we talk about joining, not joining, together, not together, coupling, decoupling. The word itself is not important. What is important is the justification. Albania is in its own right to ask clearly, directly, how long are we waiting? How long can we wait until the compromise is resolved? If there is no green light at the end of the tunnel soon, within a matter of a couple of months, it will be important for us to hear the EU saying, now enough is enough, let's move on. How? With us, together with Macedonia. That's an ideal scenario. Why not with North Macedonia? It's an ideal scenario. We'd like to have both conferences taking place. But the precedent in the EU is not the best, and there is a precedent that kept North Macedonia for about 2 decades plus, right? So we don't want to see that happening again. And I hope the EU should look at the issue of enlargement, of the process itself, no longer stagnating. It should continue, nor should it slow down, just continue. So that's why I said I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. Yeah. However, I have some hope that the inventiveness, the creativity, and the compromise approach of countries will provide a solution. Actually, there can be also a philosophical approach to the interpretation of the word compromise. Those who are able to and do strike compromises are elevated. They become greater because they make their countries move forward, and they consolidate friendships, consolidate integration, in this case, process, and consolidate the harmony amongst the nations. So I believe that we will see that very soon. So keep fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed indeed, and of course it's good to remember that history might not repeat itself, but it tends to rhyme. So we should be wary about that. Now, Mr. Cammarata, we heard from Ambassador Mazi that he was not necessarily surprised with how things transpired yesterday in the General Affairs Council. How did you receive the decision yesterday? And of course, do you think that the EU's credibility stands to be harmed as a result of what has happened again?
First, thank you very much for this kind invitation, and I take this opportunity to say hello to the distinguished members of this panel. Indeed, I mean, the position of the Commission is very clear, and it is very clearly stated in our own public documents. We consider that the conditions set by the Council in its conclusions in March 2020 have been fully met by Albania. Conditions for holding the first intergovernmental conference. What we take from yesterday's event is that while no decision was taken on the date for the first intergovernmental conference, no member state has objected to the fulfillment of these conditions. And I think that this is an important positive step. The acknowledgement of the progress made by Albania in fulfilling those conditions. You may remember last October when we published the country report, we were saying that Albania was close to meeting all these conditions. Namely, we were saying that the country had already at that time met all the conditions but one, regarding the functioning of the Constitutional Court. Now, the Constitutional Court has regained its functionality. Actually, it has already given proof of the work by dealing with a number of cases, and therefore all those conditions are met. And what is also very positive is the fact that some member states whose governments needed parliamentary scrutiny of their positions have got clearance from the parliaments. This means that there is really political support for the further progress of Albania on its EU integration. Now, we are fully confident, as also Ambassador Mazi was saying, that the next presidency, the Slovenian, the incoming presidency, Slovenian one, will make all possible for this issue to be solved in the next months. We know very much what is the commitment of the Portuguese presidency in addressing this issue. We equally know what is the commitment of the Slovenian presidency in the area of enlargement, and therefore this gives us a lot of hope for a positive solution of whatever outstanding issue is still on the table. But let me now elaborate a little bit on some of these points. And I was really intrigued by the title you chose for this policy dialogue. Indeed, Albania's race to Europe. I would say, if it is a race, it's a race to the European Union rather than Europe, because Albania is fully part of our European family. And if it is a race or a car race, as you are hinting in your title, we should not forget that this race has started long before, and that Albania has made tremendous progress. We tend to take all this for granted, which is not the case. We should really remember where the country was, a couple or 3 decades ago. And so really, I think that we are all impressed by what Albanians have been doing over the past decades, certainly with our support and encouragement, but you can see that the real will of the people, which is expressed also in the high level of support to Albania's European integration. Then, again, using this metaphor of the car race, I would like to focus on the on the latest lap. And as I was saying before, the authorities and the Albanian population have really worked hard to achieve the conditions which were put by the Council, and in the meantime also to make further progress on a number of other issues related to rule of law in particular, but more broadly, because I mean, while of course rule of law, function of democratic institutions are key issues, we should not forget that the integration process has a much wider spectrum of policies to deal with, which are also equally closer to the interest and expectations of citizens, from consumer protection to health, from agriculture to socioeconomic cohesion. Now, another element which is quite intriguing in the title you chose is this reference to the pit stops. And let's be frank, I fully understand, the emotion of those who may say, oh gosh, another pit stop? Are we wasting time in our race? This question is, of course, very legitimate, but I would like to stress that for those who like car racing, pit stops are not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, they are an opportunity to check the tires, to see whether they are the most appropriate for the rest of the race. And experience shows that good car pilots are able to use the pit stops even to improve their performance and to win the race. And therefore, now let's look briefly at what remains to be done. We have already indicated where the priorities for Albania in the in the areas we were mentioning, especially rule of law, democratic institutions. There are a number of achievements which have to be continued and consolidated. Let me mention, for instance, the justice reform. Tremendous progress has been made in that area with the vetting. Of course, this process needs to continue in order to be completed and to bring even more visible fruit to the population in Albania. And we have seen that the recent legislative modifications have created the basis for a greater efficiency of the justice reform. There are other areas which also have to be strengthened, but I think what is important is that now with the incoming parliament and government, there are the conditions for Albania to really tackle all the remaining issues. The Intergovernmental Conference will be convened at a certain point in time, but the message is that the next parliament and government will certainly have to play a key role in the initial phase of the accession negotiations. This will be really the agenda for the parliament and government for the next years. And let me maybe concluding by a couple of considerations. In this race, every meter counts, and every meter which has been already covered is a meter closer to the finish line. So, I mean, I can understand feelings and emotions about the actual date of the first Intergovernmental Conference, but the progress which has been made will certainly make Albania closer to the finish line, irrespective of when the first Intergovernmental Conference will actually take place. And my final remark about, again, the pit stop is that, okay, I mean, why there is a need for a pit stop if the car is going fine, if no tire is flat? And I have a nice example dating back from '93. At the time, Ayrton Senna was participating in the European Grand Prix, and it's interesting that that Grand Prix was called European. And well, in this European Grand Prix, he went to the pit stop, but then for whatever reason, he didn't even change the wheels, and he just continued. But due to the way he was driving and to the shape of the path, even with this maybe unnecessary pit stop, he was able to gain some time compared to his competitors and to win the race. With this spirit, I think that we should look at yesterday's event and being, cautiously optimistic, as Ambassador Mazi was saying, we need to look forward to the next stage of Albania's integration process. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cammarata. Thank you for these words of encouragement, which I think are well received by our Albanian colleagues and audience. Of course, you mentioned the political support for the progress that Albania, but also North Macedonia have made. And indeed, we've in the run-up to the General Affairs Council, we've seen also a very positive attitude even from the Netherlands, which was previously quite skeptical, especially of Albania, and we even saw the German EU minister Michael Roth taking to Twitter to plea for bilateral issues being handled bilaterally. Yet, despite all this political support, including from key players in the enlargement dossier, we didn't manage to persuade Bulgaria to change its position. So, in your opinion, if we are to do what Ambassador Mazi said, which is to continue the process must continue. How do we do that? How do we prevent that bilateral issues weigh on and interfere with the accession process from now on?
Thank you. Again, the position of the Commission has been always clear on this kind of issues. And now it's really up to the wisdom of our own member states, the Council, the Presidents, to make sure that this kind of issues is positively solved to the benefits of the European integration process. Therefore, I'm indeed confident that a solution will be found and that we can move forward. It's important from time to time also to stop, even at a pit stop, and reflect. And this is, I think, what has been happening recently. But of course, we have to reflect to find solutions rather than to go back to all the past events and so on. So with this positive spirit, I think that a solution can be found quite soon. The European integration process is about overcoming differences, is about finding compromises, as Ambassador Mazi was saying. Sometimes these compromises might not be ideal, but all of us at the end gain from these compromises. And this is the spirit which is really in the DNA of our construction. Looking for solutions, having this kind of permanent dialogue, and trying to understand the other side reasons. Because again, let me say a sentence in French rather. I mean, il suffit pas d'avoir raison, il faut rester raisonnable. And this is the spirit with which I think it will be possible to address and solve the problems that you were mentioning before. Thanks.
Thank you very much. With okay, yes, Ambassador Matia, you wanted to intervene.
Yes. You know, given the shortness of time that it's at my disposal, but you're free to continue. And I've asked my director of the cabinet to continue to be online all the time. And when I would have to leave the meeting, he would continue and reply to the questions. Of course, I took note of what Mr. Cammarata said, and I agree with almost all the points that he said. I asked for an intervention to make sure that I make some issues that are important. First, compromises are not sought by one side. Compromises are sought by all sides, 2, 3, or 4. And normally, in any diplomatic discourse, in any political discourse, in particular when identity issues are at stake, these are fundamental issues. Compromises are required by all sides that are parties to a dispute or negotiations. And normally compromises are not the highest, not the highest possible denominator. They are sometimes the lowest possible denominator, but they are great in themselves. They're great. So if a middle way is found, that's always good. The other point I wanted to raise from the points that I heard from Mr. Cammarata, actually, in the conclusions of the Council last year, in March last year, there were 15 requirements, of which there were 4 conditions. To be very precise, 15 of them were not conditions. Only 4 were conditions, and I can enumerate if you want. I was very happy to note, to hear from the Commission in their position, both from the High Representative and Commissioner Varela, in the meeting between the EU and Albania on the 1st of March. The Council for the Stabilization Association Agreement, which has not met since 2018. So I was there with the Prime Minister of my country. And we were very happy to hear for the first time there that Albania has fulfilled all the requirements and conditions for the holding of the first IGC. This was also announced in the press conference openly for the media. The second important event for us that we confirmed this position that Albania has fulfilled the requirements and conditions was when the Prime Minister met the Speaker, the President of the Parliament, European Parliament, Mr. Sassoli, as well as when he met Madam von der Leyen. Both confirmed also that requirements and conditions have been met. I read very interesting report, one of the member states, so that the audience should be more aware of these things. On the 12th of May, there was a non-paper that was submitted by the Commission at the request of the member state, how all these requirements and conditions have been met, all the 15 points. That was a very fair report. The Commission produced a very fair report, which led afterwards to a very positive response by the Parliament of one member state of the EU that was skeptical before, and there was a positive note from the Parliament, a positive debate, and a green light for the first IGC. So that actually brought more enthusiasm for our country, for the drive, for the commitment to move ahead with the process of integration, without stop, without slowing down. A few more points, very briefly, on the justice reform. Mr. Cammarata mentioned quite correctly, this is a crucial reform. Chapter 23 is the chapter of the acquis practically, because it interfaces with all other chapters. And while this chapter is politically costly for any country, any candidate country, economically is not that costly, but it is highly, highly important. This chapter actually deals in a nutshell with this justice reform. We have overhauled the entire justice system. To overhaul the entire justice system is an unprecedented step in Europe, not only in the EU, but in Europe. About 900 staff of the justice system, including judges, prosecutors, investigators, out of 900, 52% have been dismissed or have withdrawn, have resigned in order to avoid the vetting system. And it is yielding its first results. So after 4.5 years, the people, the country is seeing actually the results of the vetting process, which will continue. There is full determination to continue this, to make sure that this process continues without slowdown at all, to make sure that the country is fully determined also for the future to continue, and it will continue. an international monitoring mission has been established. And members of the EU, members of the 27, everyone has the right to have its own staff, its own legal experts in that monitoring mission to see how the country is progressing. This is reflected in the constitution of the country. So all the possible steps have been taken to make sure that the vetting institutions continue, that the vetting itself continues. Now, Mr. Cammarata mentioned three elements, and I want to very briefly touch on them. First, the High Court has resumed full functionality. It has more than the quorum required to adjudicate absolutely all cases. And the backlog, as a result, has been reduced within 2.5–3 months by 2,000 cases. Mm-hmm. The Constitutional Court is fully functional, above the quorum number required to adjudicate all cases. The Special Prosecutor's Office Against Organized Crime and Corruption, which we call with the abbreviation SPAK, SPAC, whatever. Mm-hmm. This has started its functions on the 19th of December 2019. Mm-hmm. From that time, it's 1.5 years. They have completed almost entirely the prosecutor's offices. Out of 15, 13 are in office already. 2 are undergoing vetting system with an advanced sort of speed. Yeah. The other figures, it's very interesting to see the figures. I've taken some figures here because of this Zoom that we're having. It's very important to know the institutions have formally initiated procedures against 723 assesses, of which of these vetting institutions have completed 375 vetting cases at first instance, including priority dossiers. Today, you have 23 magistrates in prison, the former Attorney General in prison, 9 former judges of the Constitutional Court and High Court are under criminal investigation, and the figures we can continue. So I want to fully subscribe to what Ms. Cammarata said. We have fulfilled the requirements and we will continue. This is very important. It is for Albania. It is not because EU asks us. It is first for us, absolutely. And also because EU asks us. And this has increased the trust of the population in the justice system. This is key, the trust of the people in the justice system. So thank you for bothering me, but I thought to...
No, I mean, I think also our Brussels audience appreciates to know all this data and the briefing that you've offered. And I think it is indeed important to highlight that both Albania and North Macedonia have taken really courageous and costly steps forward on their EU reform path. And I think for most of us, it's quite clear that that they both merit to advance, not least because, as you say, a lot of work has been done, but also a lot of work lays ahead. And the accession process, of course, or the opening of accession negotiations is not the end of the process, but the beginning of another very long path that requires a lot of work. So
may I make a small fine tuning
before I go to Ms. Miščević?
Right, and then I will stop. The negotiations, the Council approved last year the opening of negotiations. This is a political approval. They have been opened practically. Yes. What we expect is to sit down at the table for the first WC. This is a technical now start of negotiations rather than the opening of negotiations.
Definitely,
so fixing the term. And the first,
yes, absolutely. But
the first IGC itself,
work has to start. Yes.
There's a big fuss. What is this IGC all about? This is the first step only. We are creating such a big hullabaloo about it that people get totally confused, either confused by us or by the EU. I don't know. Yeah.
So we need to take the drama out of this. But now, coming to Ms. Miščević, thank you for your patience. I wanted to ask you, what do you think that are the regional implications of yesterday's decision? How do you think that other countries in the Balkan region are taking yesterday or last evening's decision?
Thank you, Corina, and it is my great pleasure to be with some very old friends, not in terms of their age, but in terms that we know each other for a very long period of time. And I have to say, Alberto, some of those words that you said today, you said to us back in 2005, 6, 7. Ambassador Mazi, just to have in mind that the European Commission is very strict, but works in a very long period of time. I would really like first, of course, to answer, Corina, to your question, but if it is possible, I would like also to add some of the salt into the discussion of some of the suggestions from my previous life for Albania negotiating process, because I also see Ardian here. We worked a lot on discussing what are the necessary steps, because yes, I could not agree more. The political basics and the most important element of the accession process of the EU enlargement policy, but also would like to stress the technical work. I know that Alberto is going to appreciate that. To take care, at least us dealing with the technical issues of the necessary steps. But let me go back first to your question. Listening very closely, of course, what is going on yesterday in Luxembourg, actually, not in Brussels. I bumped on the statement by the Prime Minister of Serbia, Ana Brnabić, saying how bad it was that there was no decision yesterday on the first IGC vote for Albania and North Macedonia. So that statement speaks much better than I could say. The region is very much lobbying for the now Albania and North Macedonia to actually start with implementing the political decision, and as Ambassador Mazi said, because it's good for the region. So it's a pure national interest, but nevertheless, we have to take into consideration that the interest, national interest, is not a bad thing. It's actually a highly positive thing. We all have our own interests to pursue. This time, our national interest of Western Balkan 6 are hand in hand in that respect. Progress in each and every enlargement path of the each and every of the Western Balkan 6 brings the development in terms of not only Europeization of our societies, but also much more to the regional cooperation, and if I may say also regional integration, which goes hand in hand with the European integration process. Let me also state something which is now very obvious. Last year, the year of pandemics, was a very bad one, assessing for in terms of the progressing towards the European path. But on the other hand, it proved to be a very good one for the regional initiatives and also operationalization of some of the ideas. So let me just remind you, mini Schengen starting 2000, so it was end 2019, beginning of 2020, as the initiative of partial Western Balkan 6. But then we developed it to the common regional market that has been endorsed 2020 October Sofia summit, together with the green agenda, which also is an important element that align us with the Green Deal for the European Union and put tremendous job in front of all Western Balkan 6, which will be very, very important and also difficult to catch up and to implement. The pandemic started with the initiative of green lanes that made possible for all of us in the region, without question mark, do we recognize each other or not? We opened boarding crossings for the health material which was needed. It also became lately very good initiative in opening the possibility for the vaccination around the region. So I would like really to argue that as Ambassador said, that EU integration is for our benefits, basically. The regional integration is starting to become considered to be in our best interest, not only living in the region, but also working and progressing towards the European integration process. If I have time, I have here in front of me, I think that you would like to hear what the region or what the citizens in the region think about the regional cooperation and such. And this is a sneak peek from the Balkan Barometer that is going to be presented tomorrow, but very interesting data. So 77% of Western Balkan citizens thinks that the regional cooperation is needed. And they would like to see more political, economic and development in their home economy as the result of the regional cooperation. For businesses, 69% of them say that the quality of regional cooperation is extremely important as they make progress. That is actually what we base the common regional market on, the need of the business community, but also the free movement of travel. One of the most important documents that we are working on is the traveling with the ID cards. It's not easy, as you can imagine, to forge the agreement among Western Balkan 6 on this. There are a lot of developments. And why it's so important? Because 2/3 of people living in the Western Balkan say that that would be of the tremendous importance for all of them. To travel only with the ID, the way that people are traveling around the Schengen system. Something that we are all looking forward, 1st of July, roaming as it home. That means no roaming fees. If I'm traveling to visit Ardian in Tirana, as we agree for such a long time, then my roaming fee will be the same or will not exist at all. That means I could use my Serbian or Bosnian phone without any additional charge. That will cut my expenses for half, which is a very good opportunity. And that is one of the elements for promoting tourism in the region, which has been heavily under influence of the pandemic. So there are many issues. If we have time, we can go back to some of the data, but let me just finish with a few tips. So technical work. I quite agree with Alberto, and that is for me something that I'm always saying. Tremendous development of Albania, maybe the biggest leap forward if we compare it with other Western Balkan 5 or others from the Western Balkan. Let me just remind you, as a researcher of enlargement policy, I have those data. Back in 97, actually 1998, the result of the report produced for the European Commission High Advisory Group, if I'm not wrong, was the name of this panel. They assessed that back in 97, 98, Albania was not ready to go into the treaty agreements with the European Union. So we forgot that that was 22 years ago. And now we are talking about fulfilling a lot of more criteria than others supposed to fulfill for opening the negotiations. But last thing, please, Ambassador, take care of the fact that IGC will be one element. Immediately afterward, you will start with the bilateral screening. Bilateral screening for the, I told you that Alberto will be happy with me mentioning that. So bilateral screening for the cluster fundamentals for the first time, that according to the new methodology. Uncharted territory, if I may say so, because we know how to deal with the bilateral screenings. But how to deal the bilateral screenings and then fulfill the criteria for starting opening the chapters of the fundamentals as soon as it's possible, that is not something that we know. So my suggestion would be for Ambassador, for the dear colleagues with the Albanian administration, start working on those technical details. When you fulfill the technical thing, then you have a strong leverage in your hand to push even political decision. That is according to my experience from my previous life.
Thank you so much, and it's very welcome. Of course, I'm sure the ambassador appreciates it as well. You've mentioned all this wonderful work and initiatives that have been launched or are in the process of being implemented, some soon, hopefully. And of course, they matter because they make a difference. They add value to the life of citizens in these countries in the region. Now, we know that shortly we will also have the Berlin process coming up. So I was wondering if you could continue with giving us a little peek, not only in the barometer data that will be published tomorrow, but also in what you expect and what is being planned for this Berlin process meeting upcoming on 5th of July, if I remember correctly.
Yes, you are right. So the Berlin process is coming home. That means that the summit is going to be in Berlin. But that will be also the end of the Berlin process. Again, the invitation for all of you following this online debate, think what would be the most appropriate way of continuing this type of initiative. There is still no answer to this question. There will be a continuous discussion after the very Berlin summit, how to use something that I like to call Berlin's process acquis. That means the developments that we had up to now in Berlin process, and to even enlarge it, being more inclusive in terms of EU member states. But for this Berlin summit, there are a lot of things that we call deliverables to be achieved. RCC particularly is working on the negotiation on achieving 4 important agreements, which are important for the free movement of people. So a part of the ID, traveling with ID cards, this is mutual recognition of qualification and mutual recognition of academic diplomas, as well as the 4th one, which is a completely new thing. This is travel for the citizens of the 3rd countries. So once when they are in the region of the Western Balkan, to continue their travel under the same conditions, which is a novelty for us. But also other issues like the innovation agenda to deal with joint efforts in progressing in the research and development, investment, what is the expression? So the screening of the situation with the investment conditions all around the region. That is what our colleagues from the KIF, the Chamber Investment Forum, are doing, and a lot of documents that are also needed for the free movement of goods. which our colleagues from the CEFTA are doing. Are we going to have the end results in that respect? I don't know. Let me remind you, we started in a different type of negotiation only October last year. It was very difficult. We only had few people-to-people negotiations. As you know, it's not easy to negotiate when you are using this type of online negotiations. But I am very happy with the developments, even if the agreements are not reached, because many issues are going also. In let me remind you, Brussels dialogue is going on, the election process in some of the Western Balkan states, preparation for the elections in some of the very important EU member states. So many parallel processes which make the environment not so easy to reaching an extremely important results. But I am positive in terms of the developments and the progress, which for our region is per se important step forward.
Thank you so much for this positive and constructive approach, reading of the situation. I'd now like to come to Ardian, and of course, we've heard about what Albania has been doing, and also what the region as a whole has been working on with support from the member states, but also from other EU institutions and bodies. And of course, you're free to comment and react to what has already been said. But I also wanted to bring in another perspective to sort of complete the puzzle, and that, of course, is all the support, financial support that the EU has earmarked for the region as part of the new EPA, including the European Investment Fund, and quite a lot of money that is now being foreseen for the region to help with recovery and socio-economic convergence. Given to the region. Is this money enough? Is it given in the proper way? What is your opinion about all this?
Thank you very much, Corina, for well, phrasing the questions in a very nice way. But I'd like just to mention the fact that I'd like to start with a question that has kind of kept me busy during the last days. Who is Goce Delcev? Basically, Tanja is laughing because, yeah, you probably studied in the history of Yugoslavia.
Exactly, that's why I was laughing.
It seems that Goce Delcev is the national hero, which Bulgaria and North Macedonia are having discussions now, negotiations to, well, basically to decide to whom it does belong, but that we as think tank and civil society representative here in Albania, at least, we have to explain to the citizen from Shkodra, Leja, Vlora, everywhere from Albania, I mean, who is this guy who has kind of been this sloppy mechanician in the pit stop, you know, that didn't have enough time to paraphrase Alberto, to change the wheel, and the car is kind of still waiting for it. But this is to say that it's complicated, it's not easy. I'll come back to the economic and investment plan by just saying that this is now this has become our problem. And when I say our, not our problem, our issue. And when I say our, is the issue of the citizen, not the issue of the government, not the issue of the European Union. Why? I'll come back to it. But I would like to bring some issues, some specifications, some details to what happened in Luxembourg yesterday. Of course, the main news was about, let's say, the pause for Albania and North Macedonia, but it was also the approval of the EPA 14 billion euros, which is extremely important, and also an opening of new chapters for Serbia and Montenegro. And this is a little bit concerning. So these are concerns, and I would like to, let's say, split a little bit the interested parties in this enlargement or the integration process, because it's the European Union, are the governments, but there are also the citizens, and not always our interests, you know, overlap 100% all of the time, which is normal and natural. For the EU, what was concerning was the blocking of Albanian and North Macedonia progress. It means that, Alberto, that your mechanism of enlargement needs to be reviewed, and seriously. The President Macron was not wrong 2 years ago, finally. For the governments of all the Southeast Europe, of Western Balkans in this case, it was the fact that there were no new chapters opening. And this reminds me of the backsliding phenomena in some new EU member states, while for the citizen, we were announced this beautiful 14 billion euros envelope. Commissioner Varhey in Tirana said there will be 30 billion, probably it will increase during the lapse, but we want to be sure that we will see some of it here in our countries. Regarding the pause in the enlargement, I may shock you guys actually, but basically we are not concerned in Albania. We are not concerned too much, and why this is because, as Alberto said, this race has started a long year ago, and as Ambassador Mazi said, we have advanced a long way in the fundamentals. Basically, we have done all the constitutional changes that the front runners, Serbia and Montenegro, need to do. We have done all the heavy lifting. I mean, the rest afterwards will be also very important and technical, but we have done it through political consent and also through constitutional changes, and this is huge. The next challenge, though, is the implementation, and how I will refer to the justice reform, as the ambassador rightly pointed out. The next step is the functioning and the good governance of the new structure. So basically, this is to say that in Albania, we are being front runners in reforming in the fundamentals. And this is very important to underline. I mean, guys, we are being front runners in the implementation of reforms. I mean, in the new enlargement methodology, we are building a center of excellence in Albania. But back to IPA 3. There will be 9 billion euros in grants and that will go for economic and investment plan. However, here the Commission, the European Union, faces two catch-22 situations. The first catch-22 is that while in the progress report of the EU starting from 2018, the EU mentioned that the Western Balkans governments are captured, or you guys negotiate with the captured states, you will transfer to those countries 14 billion euros. So this is a slight intellectual dilemma here. And the second one is also in all the progress reports, the level of the incompetence of the administration of the administrative reform is quite concerning. And you will trust to those administration a large chunk of money. So we are concerned as citizens that this money that you have earmarked for the Western Balkans will be probably spent. And we want you to hear it. And we will keep voicing it and screaming it loud, because it's time now. You are still planning the governance measures of the IPA 3, and we want to be heard. We are not complaining. We are just evidencing the fact and proposing new ways of dealing with it. So we have learned, at least in Albania, but also in very strong cooperation with like-minded think tanks in North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo, everywhere. We are learning from justice reform and the importance of good governance. And so what we are doing, we are trying to streamline the fundamentals into the economic and investment plan, because without good governance, all this money will go lost, and the trust in the EU and the EU values will go lost. And here I'm not even touching the presence of the third actors. So basically what we want the rule of law to apply during the implementation of the economic and investment plan. So I'm repeating, we want the rule of law to apply in the implementation of the economic and investment plan. And the citizen want to be able to monitor it, to report it, and also to own it. We are not beneficiaries, we are owners. We pay the taxes. In conclusion, while waiting for the politicians to do their job, think tanks and NGO are tackling those two catch-22 dilemmas that you guys in Brussels have, also in capital cities. So very practically, we have asked, and here I'm joining Tanja in what she said. I love the Berlin process. Actually, it's fantastic. We are building on our expertise of 5 years following the Berlin process, and we have officially asked the German presidency of the Western Balkan Summit a lot of, I mean, let's say 2 main requests. The first one, that the specialized think tanks and NGOs to be members of the National Investment Committee, where the prioritization of big infrastructure projects happens in the national level, but also to have the right to be observers in the Western Balkans Investment Fund. Because spending 30 billion euros without the citizen oversight, we seem it's a little bit, let's say, not too much on the citizen side. And I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ardian. Very good points. I'm sure that both Mr. Cammarata and Ms. Miščević will want to react. But I want to also at this point, given that we're left with 20 minutes out of this meeting, to open the floor for questions and comments from our audience. So if you want to intervene live, please press on the appropriate button. We already have a number of questions lined up, and I will take a couple of those because they're linked a little bit to what has been said. In particular, we have a question from Arben Malaj. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize. Who is actually asking of how can we reduce or eliminate the risk of negative impact of easy money for structural reforms, so that to avoid a repetition of what happened previously with countries like Greece, Portugal, Spain, Bulgaria, and Romania. So that's one that can be added to some of the things that Ardian have said. And then also for Ambassador Mati, because I know that he has to leave potentially. You mentioned that the decision yesterday could have an impact on public opinion in your country, but we have also a question from Teodora Campritetti, who is asking, is it possible that this delay will also destabilize Albania's internal affairs and cause backsliding? And I suppose that this is referring to political dynamics. I'm going to quickly check if, yeah, we have 2 raised hands. And if you don't mind, given also Ambassador Mati's situation, I'm going to take the questions and then we'll come back for a final round from our panelists. So I would like to invite Andre de Munte to pose his question if he's still with us. Andre, can you hear us?
Yes, Corina, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much. And hello to everybody. Nice to see so many well-known faces. It's more of a comment than a question. I would like to fully subscribe to what Ardian said about Albania being the front runner on the fundamentals. I have been saying this and repeating this for many years, asking questions also in public. I mean, what about the dynamics in the EU? We should also do some introspection, like what on earth are we doing to ourselves and to the region sometimes? I mean, if you compare the situation in Serbia, which hasn't done anything for 10 years on the Venice Commission opinion of 2007 on the constitution, and if you look, I mean, I would like to know the precise percentage of the constitution of Albania which has been redrafted. I mean, we can see all the different colors in the Euralius system. I think it is more than 1/3. Well, yes, my guess would have been 40% or not. I mean, it is really impressive. I would like to invite everybody to do that. And if we see where Albania is in the waiting room still, while we have opened half of the chapters with Serbia, good for Serbia, I mean, no criticism there, but which has to do all the work still in a very opaque, vague way, which is happening still now with consultation rounds that on the constitution that raise questions in my mind and many other people's minds. I think it's very fair for Ardian to make this point. The real front runner there is Albania, and the 2 others, I'm sorry to say, are so-called front runners also in the area of freedom of expression. I mean, 5 consecutive Commission assessments of no progress. Let's think about that. So thanks God, whether you are religious or not, I mean, the expression is there. Thank God that we don't use the dates 2025 any longer. And let's also restart the discussion about the feasibility of having dates. A last word is about decoupling or coupling. In my mind, it is almost an unhealthy discussion. I never thought any country was coupled. I mean, the ambassador also said it is about own merits. So the merits are there or they are not there. I mean, just because we have, I mean, almost simultaneously 2 countries being ready in their own way, it doesn't mean that they are tied to each other. Of course, it sounds nice to take them in both at the same time at the level of intergovernmental conferences, but in my mind, there was never a question of intentional coupling of the 2 countries. That was just a remark I wanted, yes. I wanted to make. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Andre. And of course, we've heard a lot of concerns and complaints about the way the process the enlargement process is going, and I just wanted to put it on the table for whoever wants to pick it up. Do we then have to look at the unanimity rule, and should we change that for the at least for some of the intermediary steps of the accession process? But now I will come back to our wonderful panelists and give them the chance to cherry pick among those questions and issues for a last round of interventions. And I will start from Ambassador Mazi, who I know is pressed for time.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, for giving me the floor first. I've sent messages that I can stay 10 minutes more, so I will be a bit late in the other meeting. Well, first I'll start with a very clear sentence, which I think is pertinent to Albania and as a message actually from my country to the EU. We consider the European Union as the biggest political economic project after World War II. And this great project is such that we want to join because we wish to make our modest contribution in making this project a big, big success. EU, without our countries in, cannot complete itself as a global player. It is not yet there. A small region, which is not a backyard. It's an Innenhof, the Germans say it's an Innenhof. It's an internal garden surrounded by EU. Having said that, second, I fully agree with all the comments that were made by Ardian here, very pertinent. Just make a distinction between the economic investment plan and the Western Balkans Investment Fund. Now, 2 things which go together for one purpose, which is the increase, the uplift of the infrastructure in the country, or in our countries, in the whole region, making the region more competitive, enlarging the market, the regional infrastructure network of the EU. And here we have had difficulties. Of course, we were struck by an earthquake in 2019, which hit the country very badly. And on the pandemic, they had long-term impact on sustainable development, but we did our best to make sure that the post-pandemic recovery, especially on employment, on connectivity, innovation, digitalization, transport, energy, climate action, environment, what have you, they have all to be tackled in parallel, and they have been tackled in parallel. To the point that Tanja mentioned on the technical issues, this is very crucial, absolutely crucial. I am aware of the importance of, right after the first IGC, we are going to have the screening process. In order to prepare for that, and I fully subscribe to the previous speakers also, Andre made that point, Ardian made the point also, there are 2 aspects that we need to align in preparation for the period post first IGC: legal gap analysis and institutional gap analysis. Both across the board of the 34 chapters have been dealt harmoniously, horizontally, not vertically. I know how important fundamentals are. The new methodology is going to be experimented for the first time with Albania and North Macedonia. So let's see. It's good. We have approved it and we'll move forward. The point is that if we focus as such, and that's a technical political issue, if we focus only on the chapters 5 plus 3, without a chapter 3 issues under fundamentals, we would give the message to all the chapters below in other clusters that they are not as important as the fundamentals. So the purpose has been, in the preparation period of 1 year that I'm in this position, to keep the attention and the focus of all at the same level. One other issue that is linked with the question, whether this would be a destabilizing or stabilizing factor, I would not think at all that this will be a destabilizing factor, what happened yesterday, and what hopefully will happen with a clear message in tomorrow's meeting. Our countries have progressed quite a lot. It's substantial progress that's been recorded there. And I don't believe that frustration or fatigue is going to lead to lowering of attention. We will keep the momentum going. We'll keep the reform process going. And let me take this opportunity to greet my friend, an old friend, Minister Malay, who is a very knowledgeable person, and he's been very helpful with his comments. I read the comments in the questions and answers. So the 9 billion that Ardian mentioned that EU has allocated will be, in this time, for IPA 3, given the new regulation that has been approved by the Parliament now. Of course, the final approval will be by the Troika, and you know what I mean with the Troika, Parliament, Commission, Council. Yeah. The agreement will be practically in September, sometime like that. We hope that will help the infrastructure of our countries enormously to make sure that all connectivity aspects, road, infrastructure, transportation, are in preparation and ready when the time comes to join 7 years from now, 6, 8 years from now. It will depend on the speed of the talks. And I don't like to use the term negotiation because there's not much to negotiate. Directives cannot be touched. The rest can be, let's see, the talks will give us the message. So we will maximize our efforts, we'll maximize our attention, and we'll continue our preparations to make sure that we sit at the negotiations table as soon as it is possible. And I hope, repeating myself, I hope that you will find the strength to keep the process going. Enlargement should continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you also for delaying your next meeting just so that you can share your thoughts with us. I really appreciate it. Ms. Miščević, if you're ready, I'm happy to give you the floor for your final remarks and reactions.
Yeah, the actual problem that something that we know, which is known as the enlargement fatigue, the excuse or the explanation for challenges that we have, and let me use the EU vocabulary, the challenges that we are facing with the European integration of the Western Balkans 6 has, and your participants are right when they ask that question, they has or tend to give the implication that something that we faced in some other countries, namely Montenegro, but also Serbia, as the reform fatigue. And that is a very powerful argument that we can also use. So we could not agree more. We are not doing things, or not supposed to do things because EU, Brussels is asking us to do. But you did such a heavy amount of changes within the constitution, 40% or even more changes in the constitution, because it was needed for the state and society in Albania. But if that was not supported, forged, mediated, and initiated from the European Union, it will take you 2 decades to reach that type of changes. And that is the powerful tool or instrument of the negotiation process and the integration process. So in my account, actually, I do consider, and I hope that Alberto will not take me ill on this, EU negotiation process as an instrument of reforms, not negotiation for the negotiations, not EU membership for the EU membership, but as an instrument of internal reforms. And that is I think the biggest message that I could transfer to you being the researcher of the European integration, the chief negotiator for my country, but also now following the integration process of each and every of the Western Balkan 6 and the regional integration loop. The instrument of our regional internal integration are the EU standards. We are not devising our own regional Western Balkan standards, but we are using what they exist in the European Union. And even for that, EU is the instrument.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that powerful message, Ms. Miščević. Mr. Cammarata, I'm sure you're eager to react. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for inviting me. Thank you. Bye-bye to all. Thanks for this.
Very much
Excellent meeting.
I'm sure you're eager to react, especially on the issues linked to the money that is foreseen for the region.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the question is, of course, very pertinent, and it might sound like a dilemma. I mean, should the EU taxpayers support countries which are still coping with corruption issues, sometimes even high-level corruption, or should we refrain from supporting the countries? I think that, in a sense, this is a false dilemma. Because it depends what to do with this money and how this money is going to be spent in the country. That's why we insist so much on rule of law reforms. This is a guarantee for the EU taxpayers, but this is also a tremendous guarantee for Albania, in this case, taxpayers. It's a matter of accountability. I need to know as a taxpayer how my money is going to be spent. Is it going to be spent efficiently and effectively, wasted, or even, shall I say, stolen? This is the issue that we should always keep in mind. Therefore, in the past, we have been insisting on fundamental reforms in the field of justice, in the field of fight against corruption, and we will continue to do that. But let's also be clear, there are reforms which do not cost a single euro, a single cent. It's really a matter of goodwill to take the right decisions, to choose between the different models, and to follow, in our view, the European way, the European standards. Take the case of the reform of the constitution in Albania, a huge endeavor, especially when it comes to the establishment of the re-evaluation of justice and prosecutors, the vetting. Of course, the EU has been assisting. The EU is supporting also financially the international observers, but in relative terms, this is a rather limited investment, financially speaking, which is likely to produce a huge impact on the rule of law system, but also on the business environment, on the attractiveness of the country when it comes to investments. So that's the point. I fully agree with Ardian that indeed a lot of attention should be given to rule of law as a, should I say, a precondition for assistance, but also as an essential ingredient of the way we implement our funds. And that's why in the famous first cluster on rule of law, we have included also, elements which really related to the functioning of administration, to the way, public finances are managed, because they are closely interlinked. Indeed, it wouldn't make much sense to flood a country with a lot of money while the administration is weak or too fragmented, too politicized. And for this reason, we have been working also on the reform of the public administration in Albania and the other countries of the region. And I must say that when it comes to Albania, we have seen encouraging steps. over the past years. Of course, now one of the challenges the country has is to have shall I say, more mature, more sophisticated policy planning and also policy monitoring in order for the authorities, but also for the citizens to have a vision of where this money should be used and how it is being used in order to increase this accountability. And maybe one final remark from my side. I mean, back to this nice metaphor of the pit stop. It's important to have good mechanics who are well trained and ready to intervene whenever there is a need. And that's the reason why we insist so much on having a good, shall I say, negotiation structure, which indeed will help the country carry out reforms. As was said before, negotiations are a powerful instrument of reforms. The word negotiation is misleading, as we know. It would be better to call it, preparation for accession, where there is no real, bargaining between the EU and the country concerned. Is a process whereby we show and share our experience. We provide support. We get from the countries, their feedback. We are ready to work together. And I would like just to conclude by insisting on the word reform. It's not just about changing the form. Actually, it's about changing the substance. And only if reforms are substantial, they will bring the famous visible, tangible results for the citizens. And this is the most important, if I may say so, of the negotiation benchmarks. And this is the challenge for everybody involved in this process, but this is also what should inspire us to do more and to do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And obviously this is why it's so difficult, because it has to be wholesale. It's a real transformation. Thank you very much, Mr. Cammarata. And now for the very final words in the last 2 minutes that we have available, I come to Ardian. And just to be fair and include also a last question from our audience, coming from Sarah Jurit, if I pronounce it correctly. She's asking whether Albania has a marketing problem and should do more for its image, because people might not be aware of all the great work that the country has been doing. So with that, over to you, Ardian, for the final comments.
Thank you. Starting with Sarah, yes, indeed, it's one of the Albania problems, almost systemic problems that we have been facing during the last decade, so to say, but it's getting better because the more tourists, the more citizens come in, the more foreigners come in to spend holidays here, the better our image abroad, first in the population, and afterwards it will kind of imbibe the institutions. But it's a real problem. I noted 4 points from my predecessors. The first one is how to control the EU spending, coming from Professor Malay. We basically, by improving the governance of the mechanisms that the EU has now at its disposal for the economic and investment program, where the most important is Western Balkans investment framework. Its governance is being under review, as Alberto mentioned. It will be probably approved in September, October. To increase the visibility, we want the civil society, citizens, specialized think tanks, of course regulated, to be observers. We have submitted an official request to the German presidency of the Western Balkan Summit. You can find it in the Aspen Foundation website and Sudost Europa Get a Shop website. Or I can send you a copy to everybody that is interested. If you can subscribe, it will be perfect. The second point is what the Ambassador Mazi mentioned after the ICG, talking about the technical issues, which Tanja so rightly points out and underlines and hammers in at every moment, because the detailed skill. I was very, very happy to hear him that it will be a legal gap, but also an institutional gap assessment, which brings me to good governance. Without good governance, we are good to nothing. I am very happy, and I subscribe 1000% what Tanja said. Enlargement, it's not a goal for itself. We don't I almost was saying something, but enlargement must be an instrument for reform. Chapters, nobody knows chapters. I mean, come to Tirana, ask the citizen what they know about chapters. I know what they will answer. Ask to them if they want to be members of the EU, where do they want to study, if they want to have better roads, better police, etc., etc. I know what their answer will be. So, enlargement at the service of the reforms. And regarding the help, it's not a yes, Alberto, it's not a yes. I mean, you framed it very smartly, but it's not a yes and no dilemma to help countries or not to help countries. It's with whom and how. For the moment, I mean, all this amount of money will be decided between the following actors. The first is the government, the second is the EU, the third are the IFIs, and the fourth are business consultants. Because as you probably know, without business consultants, our administrations will be paralyzed. No country has built institutions with business consultants. We all probably know this. So what we want to bring in the citizen, we want to increase the transparency, we want to increase the outreach, we want to introduce moral hazard. I want to know if somebody at WBIF has suffered because of the delays, has lost his job or something or the contract. Maybe, maybe not. So basically, we want to include accountability in all this process because there is no accountability, so that the EU may be able to apply conditionality. The financing of infrastructure, it's your soft belt. You cannot apply conditionality, especially now where there are so many project pipelines. We can find money. People are offering us to finance different infrastructure projects, huge ones, which you are aware of, I'm sure. And that was all. Help us to help you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ardian. And obviously, quite a few of the issues which we've started to discuss today remain open, and we'll continue to look into solutions as the word was mentioned. A lot of work still lies ahead of us. I'm very grateful that we've started this conversation today. I'm really thankful to all the wonderful contributions of our distinguished panelists and also to our audience for staying with us until the very end. We'll have to close now. I wish everyone a wonderful day, and I look forward to welcoming you to our next events on the Balkan region, on enlargement, and on Albania in particular. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.